Welcome to the Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth podcast with Nathan Barkocy, where we're passionate about creating time freedom, impact, and purpose through real assets and real relationships, because true wealth isn't solely what you have, it's who you become. I'm your host, Nathan Barkocy, and today I'm grateful to be with Peter Schiff. Thank you for being with me, Peter.
Nathan, how are you?
I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So, Peter, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to give a quick introduction of everything that you've done so far. Peter is an American economist, author, and investment manager who gained prominence by forecasting the 2008 financial crisis and critiquing U.S. debt and monetary policies. He co-founded Echelon Wealth Partners in Canada. He is involved in other financial services, including Euro-Pacific Asset Management and Schiff Gold. Do you think that covers a short version of it all?
Well, there's a lot more stuff. By the way, Echelon is now called Ventum, and I don't have much to do with it, although I am a shareholder.
Yeah.
But my main businesses are Euro-Pacific Asset Management, Schiff Gold, as you said. I have a newsletter through publishing company Schiff Sovereign, and I do my podcast at Schiff Radio, the Peter Schiff Show, and I'm pretty active on social media.
Yeah. So can you walk me through that asset management? I know that when we're here at an investment conference like this, right, there's so many different investments. I have heavy holdings in real estate, and I've been very focused on real estate. But being here, my eyes have been open to so much beyond that, right? To all of the gold and the silver and then the mining, right? And then everything the gallium. There's so much necessity for all of this copper and minerals. And so I'm curious how you are able to manage these assets for your clients.
Well, we mainly manage portfolios of stocks and bonds. So we do have companies in our portfolios that are involved in those areas. So resource companies, mining companies, energy companies, agriculture companies. So we get exposure to those resources through companies that, own them and or harvest them or develop them and sell them. So, and their profits will be impacted. If you have a gold mining company and the price of gold goes up, that's good for their profits because now they earn more money on the gold that they're selling. They can increase their dividends. They can increase their share buybacks. And so, it rewards the shareholders. And so we're managing portfolios right now that are designed to take advantage of what I believe is still an early stage bull market in these resources, particularly in precious metals, which is, big topic of this conference. In the exhibit hall, you'll see all sorts of mining companies that are exhibiting here at this conference. But we also manage money in companies that have nothing to do with resources, but are good businesses that generate good income, that pay good dividends, and that I think will continue to grow their earnings and increase their dividends over time.
Okay. So I'd like to dive into kind of the current marketplace right now. I know within the past 10 days, we've had some videos come out from you really talking about the volatility of the gold market and how that's really playing an effect on the dollar bill, right? The decline of the dollar bill. So I'd like to dive into, since you really were able to analyze 2008 and predict that financial crisis, what do you see in similar times now, and how can we adjust moving forward?
Well, I think the coming crisis is going to be much, more substantial, even though the '08 crisis was certainly, a big deal. I think what we're heading for is going to be an even bigger deal. And it's not just like a mortgage crisis. It's going to involve sovereign debt of the United States, where it's not just that people are worried about subprime mortgage borrowers repaying their loans. They're worried about the U.S. government repaying. And not that the government can't print money, but that the money that it prints might not have much value. And so it's not much of a consolation to our creditors if we pay them off in money that doesn't buy very much. And so that's part of a U.S. dollar crisis, which is going to be, wrapped around this sovereign debt crisis. So it's a crisis of confidence in both the dollar and our ability to repay dollars without debasing the dollar. And that's where we're headed. And I think that's the reason that gold is at $4,000 an ounce. And I think it's going a lot higher because the concerns about the creditworthiness of the United States and its ability to honestly repay its debts are going to be called into question, as is the independence of the Federal Reserve and the confidence that the world has had in their ability to manage the dollar or maintain their 2% inflation target. I think that target has been given up, and the world is going to have to prepare for inflation rates that are vastly in excess of that. And in that type of world, you don't want to hold dollars. You don't want to hold U.S. dollar denominated debt. And that's going to be a game changer for the U.S. and not in a good way. We're going to have to be confronted with some profound economic problems that I don't think we're prepared to deal with.
And so when we get to there, so I know that this is where the international trade is what you referenced, right? And this is what's really interesting to me right now as a 26-year-old, right? I'm trying to explore all of the different investment paths. Like I said, I have a lot of
You're
real
lucky
estate
to be
holdings.
26, though, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we're moving forward, and obviously there's a lot of talk about cryptocurrency right now, and you've done a lot of talking about this, and I think everyone knows your analysis of such. But with international considerations, right, there is that it's easier to trade internationally, and then of course without the governments. And there's a whole podcast we could get into here. But I'm curious how you could compare that to gold, right? So if we're using it as a currency, right, using gold or cryptocurrency without the influence or tax.
Nobody is
right?
really using either as a currency. In fact, gold's not a currency. Gold is money, but it hasn't really been used as money really since 1971. And prior to that, it was used indirectly because all the paper was backed by gold. So we were on a gold standard, the world was. But at one time, of course, people walked around with gold coins in their pockets and silver coins in their pockets. And that was going on for hundreds or thousands of years where precious metals functioned as money. Bitcoin has never functioned as money, really. I mean, there are a small fraction of the Bitcoin owners who kind of barter it with one another. But by and large, Bitcoin is a gambling token. People buy it because they believe the price is going to go up. And, they sell it after it has gone up and they want to buy something. Or now people are borrowing against their Bitcoin because they don't want to sell it. That's going to be a disaster. But I don't think Bitcoin has anything in common with gold. I think that the way Bitcoin is promoted, they try to pretend that it's some kind of digital version of gold just because the way they try to depict it. When you see an image of Bitcoin, which of course doesn't really have an image, it's just a string of numbers, computer generated. But when they try to put an image, it's represented as a coin, and they make it gold. And so they try to make it look like gold.
Yeah.
And they talk about Bitcoin mining and the miners. Well, nobody is mining Bitcoin. Nobody has a pick and a shovel and is digging Bitcoin out of the ground. Computers are solving a problem. So they're not mining. They're, problem solving, right? But they're trying to make it sound like Bitcoin is gold because it's being mined and it looks like a coin. But that's all part of the fraud in the way Bitcoin is sold to the public. Bitcoin is no more digital gold than if I draw a picture of a hamburger and I try to tell you it's digital food, right? I mean, you can't eat it. If your diet is just digital food, you're going to starve to death, right? So gold is a commodity. It's a precious metal, and it's the most useful metal that we have. It's used in all sorts of industries. Obviously, the biggest is jewelry. And I have, I'm wearing a gold bracelet. I have a gold watch. I mean, I'm wearing some gold at this gold conference. But, so this is a use for gold, right? I mean, this is a nice watch. It wouldn't be as nice if it wasn't made out of gold, right? But gold is used in electronics. There's gold in my cell phone. Gold is used in aerospace. It's used in dentistry. I mean, the only reason that gold isn't used even more is because it's so expensive.
Right.
And so to the extent that you can substitute a metal that's not quite as good, but it's a lot cheaper, a lot of times that will be done. But sometimes it's so important that you use gold that you pay the extra money to get it, right? But Bitcoin has no use other than the fact that I can trade it. But money has to have a use separate from its use as a medium of exchange, because that's what makes it a store of value, because you're storing the value. So gold is a commodity. I can use it as money. We can use it, as a medium of exchange, and we can buy and sell and pay each other in gold. But where does the value of the gold comes from? It comes from the fact that there are jewelers who need it, that there are computer makers and cell phone makers who need it, that there, is an aerospace industry. There are dentists that need the metal. And so it has actual value. And that value can be stored over time because gold doesn't decay, it doesn't rot, right? It's a unique commodity. It has an indefinite shelf life. So that's ideal for a store of value. But Bitcoin doesn't have any use case apart from the fact that people think they're going to get rich by buying it. But the only way you get rich by buying it is if you can sell it to somebody else who thinks they're going to get rich, even though they're buying it at a higher price than you did. And there's a name for that, and it's the greater fool theory. And that is the principle upon which Bitcoin is based. And the problem with the greater fool theory is eventually you run out of fools, and the last fool becomes the bag holder, and end up losing all the money when the music stops. And the question is, has it stopped, right? Bitcoin, as we're talking, around 102, 103,000. It got as high as 126,000. Now, was that the peak? I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I mean, maybe it'll go to 150,000, and the people who bought it at 126,000, in theory, could get out with a profit. But maybe it's never going to get back to 126,000. Maybe it's peaked and now it's going down. And in fact, in terms of gold, Bitcoin is down even more. It's down about 20% in dollars, but it's down by 33% or so in gold from its peak. So it's in a bigger bear market relative to gold than it is relative to the fiat dollar.
Right. Which is really interesting. So gold would be a real asset then, right? And the most valuable asset to invest into long term, which is what we're talking about here at Main Street Media Network, right? Getting people off of the passive dependence. Right?
Gold's like money.
Right.
Yeah. It's an asset, but it's money, as opposed to buying into a gold stock, right? Which is more an investment because you own shares of a company that may own gold or does own gold and that mines gold. But that's a business. And, I think that people should be investing in businesses, whether it's your own business or you buy a share in a publicly traded company. But gold is not really an alternative to income producing assets like stocks or like real estate. It's really an alternative to cash. And I think it's a much better way to store your dry powder. If you think stocks and real estate are expensive and you'd prefer to wait for a better price, it's better to wait in gold. Gold is a better position to be in because inflation could wipe out the value of cash. And so even if the real price of the assets that you thought were expensive goes down, it can go up in terms of the dollars that you're holding on to.
Right.
So that's where I think it belongs in a portfolio instead of cash that you might hold to keep some dry powder. Keep that in gold.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so my company, Schiff Gold, is a great place to buy it. Because there's a lot of companies out there that take advantage of people that don't really understand the gold market, and they end up ripping them off by selling them overpriced, so-called collectible coins. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be, bait and switched into being a coin collector. You want to buy bullion.
Yeah.
And so you want to buy the coins and bars that are the most recognizable. So therefore they're the most liquid, but they have the thinnest spreads because you want to be able to buy something for not much above the spot price of gold or the melt value.
Right.
So all of your money ends up in the gold, not in the pocket of the person who sold it to you.
Yeah. So then, because one of my questions for you was, if you were mentoring this next generation of wealth builders, right, what would your advice be for them? And really, it's holding that value in the gold as opposed to a depreciating dollar.
Right. But that you don't build wealth with gold. You retain the wealth that you've accumulated by putting it into gold. But you build wealth, by working hard and saving and investing in growing your own business or investing in other people who are growing businesses, but, to accumulate actual wealth. I think a lot of people, they think, oh, I got all this money in crypto. They may think they have wealth, but that could evaporate very quickly. I mean, real productive wealth, owning real things that produce income, right? That would be wealth. Having real property or owning businesses or factories or even intangible wealth. I mean, you can invent something, or you can have a patent or a copyright, or you can have something that can generate income for you, generate revenue, and those would be a type of wealth too. But Bitcoin doesn't really do anything unless somebody wants to buy it from you at a higher price.
Right.
But it doesn't pay interest. It doesn't pay dividends. There's no cash flow associated with it. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't improve anybody's life. I mean, you can improve your life if you buy Bitcoin and then find some fool to buy it from you at a higher price than what you paid. You can cash out with some money, and then you can do something. But what you gain is just going to be offset by what the guy who bought it from you loses.
Right.
You're just spending his money, and he's got your worthless Bitcoin, but he's hoping he can pass it to the next fool.
There
right?
you go. Right.
Before the whole thing collapses.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So I also own a real estate restoration business in Fort Worth. So it's a service-based business. So how would you advise me, and also any of my audience who owns a business that's service-based, right, that doesn't hold a real asset necessarily, how would you advise them to move forward with all of the cash flow that they generate in their business?
Well, the asset that you would have would be the goodwill of your business, your customer relationships. That has value, right? And your ability to leverage that, and your reputation in the community or within the industry for doing good work, and for being efficient, and for getting stuff done on time. All of that has real value. Building up a brand, building up a reputation that gives you an advantage in the marketplace. So you want to cultivate that, and you want to protect that. Was it Warren Buffett or somebody? It takes a lifetime to build a reputation and a minute to blow it. Right?
Blow it.
Right? So you got to be very careful with those types of assets. So even though you don't have a lot of physical, plant and equipment, you build up a lot of goodwill and relationships that ultimately generates income, which is what you want. You want to be able to generate income without actually having to work.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You don't want to be stuck where the only income you can get is from the sweat of your own, brow. You want to have income that, where you can make income while you're sleeping, right? Or while you're on vacation, right? So you have more free time, and you have more leisure.
Yeah. And so especially because of you've been so, almost unorthodox, right? Going against the tide of the dollar, right? For so long, there's been certain times in your career, I'm sure, that you've encountered, a lot of pushback, as some failures, some difficulties. And I know as an entrepreneur, it's not a failure unless you actually sit down and stop, right? You just have to keep moving forward. It's not a stop sign, it's a yield sign, right? So what do you think the number one difficulty that you faced was, if you can think of one?
I faced so many problems.
Right.
I'm facing all kinds of problems right now, governments, lawyers. But I say, I say corruption in government, corruption in the media have been, big problems that I've had to deal with, and I'm still dealing with now.
Yeah. How have you been able to pivot from that?
Well, man, I'm
keep going.
I'm
keep
still
taking action.
I'm still. I mean, a lot of people just walk away from a lot of this stuff, but I have a lot of principle, and so if somebody does something wrong, I have a hard time just walking away. I try to set it right. And that's so that's very distracting too for me, because I can spend that time doing other things,
Right.
you know,
Being
other
productive.
than, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's perfect. Well, Peter, I appreciate your time today. Thank you. There's obviously so much more we could get into, but I know that our time is very consumed here at this conference, and you're able to give a
Yeah,
lot.
well-
what's one final thing that you would like to leave our audience with
Well,
regarding gold?
first of all, good luck with your
Yeah, thank you.
podcast. But I would encourage your audience to also be part of my audience. I know even though I'm, quite a bit older than you, there's something to be said for age and wisdom and experience. And a lot of people think, oh, the baby boomers. I mean, we don't get it. We don't know anything. And we thought the same thing when we were the young people, when I was in my 20s, and I was dealing with the older generations. And you're going to be in the same position I'm in now, in 30 or 40 years, when young people think you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
But we do know,
Yeah.
right? We've been there, we've done that. And so there's a lot to be learned from the people that have walked in your shoes for years before you even had feet.
Right.
So, pay attention to what I have to say on my podcast. Follow me on X. I'm posting quite often. There's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people are saying stuff that's wrong. And so, you're going to get the truth. Peter Schiff, I got about, a little over 1.2 million followers there. You can sign up for my YouTube channel. I also put my podcast there at Schiff Radio. You can sign up at Schiff Sovereign and start reading my newsletter at schiffsovereign.com. And look for my mutual funds, Europe Pacific Asset Management at europac.com. I have 5 mutual funds. People can buy them no load at discount brokers, or you can actually, if you don't have a brokerage account, you can buy my mutual funds directly off my website at europac.com. And again, Schiff Gold to get started buying physical gold and silver. And in fact, if you don't have that much money, I just launched T Gold, and that's just the letter T Gold. And that's, for not virtual gold, but it's gold that we buy, that we store for you, both gold and silver. You can buy in any increments. You can open up an account for $50 and start accumulating gold. Ultimately, you'll be able to use that gold as a medium of exchange. We're going to eventually tokenize it too. You'll be able to withdraw a gold-backed token. So I'm going to build up a whole ecosystem where people can start using gold as money, not just keeping it as a medium of exchange, as a store of value, but utilizing it in day-to-day transactions to make payments peer-to-peer, but also to deal with third parties and merchants, and if you're a merchant, to deal with your customers. So that's tgold.com.
That's incredible. Yeah. Okay. And one thing that you were closing off there with is really discussing the difference between wisdom and knowledge, right? And so you were discussing this, and I think this is something that is so important for the audience, right? Is this cross-generational type of opportunity that I'm able to work with you and you're sharing your wisdom with me, right? And although I'm 26 and you've been able to build up such an opportunity, such an experience, right?
Yeah,
you're able to share that wisdom,
You
right?
can gain knowledge through reading, and you can learn things, but wisdom is something that is acquired over time.
Right.
You just can't, you just don't get wise.
Yeah.
Because you read something.
Right.
And so that's why if you talk to people, and there's still people that are quite a bit older than me that, have more experience, more life experience. But when you're young, your life experience is very limited as to what you've actually done. I mean, you're just living at home, you're going to school, and you haven't encountered a lot of the things, because a lot of the wisdom comes from experience.
Right.
It's not something you can just necessarily read about in a book. You've got to live it. You've got to do it. And then you can learn from those experiences. You can learn from those mistakes. And in fact, a lot of young people right now are making a lot of mistakes that hopefully they will learn from. One of those mistakes is getting into Bitcoin.
There we go. We're right back to it, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, Peter, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for meeting with us.
All right, my pleasure. Good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been the Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth podcast with Nathan Barkocy. And just remember that tomorrow is never promised. Time is our most valuable asset. So make the most of today.